G'day guys, Max here from Evidence-Based Football Manager. This is part 11 of my training analysis series for FM23. This video is kind of like an addendum to the previous video where I published my evidence-based training schedule version 23. There are some experiments that I've done in the past that are relevant for the construction of my evidence-based training schedule, but I didn't really get a chance to present them in any of my previous videos, so I wanted to go through those experiments with you today. And there are also some frequently asked questions regarding my EBTS that I wanted to address as well. First of all, I'll show you an experiment that investigates whether there is a dose-dependent relationship between the number of training sessions per week and the amount of player growth. In other words, would a training schedule that contains 3 defending sessions per week boost the growth of your players more than a schedule that contains 2 defending sessions per week? This is information that I need in order to determine exactly how many training sessions per week can achieve the optimum amount of growth in my custom training schedule. So I'll show you the experiment. You're all familiar with my methodology. I used my own test league setup for these tests. These tests were done a few months ago when the game was on version 23.3, so do take note of that. I prepared multiple versions of training schedules that use different numbers of training sessions per week, and then I tested the amount of player growth that results from those training sessions. For example, I made a training schedule that looked like this, that uses 1 defending session per week, and I filled the training calendar of the test league teams with this schedule for the whole year, and I simulated the game until the end of the season. The experiment was done with schedules with up to 7 defending sessions per week, which is the maximum number of times the same type of training session can be used in a single week. I tested 4 different types of training sessions in the game: defending, match practice, ground defense, and physical. And let's take a look at the results. I have 2 line graphs here. The first one here represents the amount of CA growth shown by the players of the test league. The second table here represents the amount of attribute growth for the same sets of players. For example, when players only did 1 match practice training per week, their CA points grew on average by just under 8 points per season, whereas when they did 2 match practice sessions per week, their CA points grew by around 12 points per season. And here you can see that when players did 4 defending sessions per week, their attributes grew by around 16 points per week, whereas when they did 7 defending sessions per week, their attributes grew by a bit more than 18 points per week. So with defending and ground defense training sessions, you can see that the relationship between the number of sessions per week and the amount of growth is not exactly linear. The bulk of player growth can be achieved just with 3 or 4 sessions per week, and any extra sessions on top of that will start giving you diminishing returns. There's really not much point using 7 defending sessions per week when the majority of benefit can be reaped just with 3 or 4 sessions per week. If you take a look at match practice, you can tell why match practice is such a powerful training session. Just 1 match practice session per week caused heaps of growth, both in terms of CA and attributes. And with 2 match practice sessions per week, the amount of growth is not exactly double, but it's still a very good amount of growth that can be achieved just with 2 training slots per week. Now, you can only use match practice up to 2 times a week, and I know there's a glitch in the game which allows you to go over that limit and use more than 2 match practice sessions per week, but I didn't want to rely on glitches or bugs to make my training schedule. So I'm sticking to 2 match practice sessions per week for my evidence-based training schedule. Now, physical training session is an interesting one. According to these 2 graphs, it appears that 2 or 3 physical sessions per week is all you need to boost the physical attributes of your players, and any more sessions on top of that will not return any additional benefits. Actually, the graph on the left-hand side is a little bit misleading. When you use only physical training session for the whole year, the physical attributes of your players will grow, but the technical and the mental attributes will decline, which kind of messes up the CA ratings of your players. So we'll just ignore the results from the first graph for now. On this graph, which shows you the amount of physical attribute growth, you can see that 2 physical sessions per week is a little bit better than 1 session per week, and 3 sessions per week is a little bit better than 2 sessions per week. And when it comes to physical attributes, I want every little bit of growth that I can get, because physical attributes are supposed to be the most important attributes in Football Manager. So although using 2 or 3 physical training sessions per week is not as cost efficient as just using 1 session per week, I'm still happy to include 3 physical sessions in my evidence-based training schedule in order to squeeze out as much physical growth as possible from my players. All right, let's move on to the second experiment that I wanted to show you today. I basically made minor variations to my evidence-based training schedule so that I could compare all of their effects on player growth and make sure that my EBTS is the combination that's the most effective out of all those variations. In part 7 and part 8 of this training analysis series, I elected 5 different types of training sessions in FM23 as the basic ingredients of my training schedule. But I wasn't super confident exactly how many of each of those 5 types of sessions I needed to use in my training schedule. So I basically came up with heaps of different combinations using those 5 types of training sessions, and I tested their effects on player growth using my test league. So let's take a look at the results. These are the combinations that I tested. Some of them using 11 sessions per week and some of them using 10 sessions per week. You can see the amount of CA growth in this column here and the total amount of attribute growth in this column here. And out of all these combinations that I tested, this one here is the winner. 3 defending plus 2 attacking plus 3 physical plus 2 match practice plus 1 ground defense. When players in my test league used this combination of training schedule throughout the season, their CA ratings grew on average by 18.94 points per season, and their attributes grew on average by 25.94 points per season, which is the best result out of all these combinations that I tested. And that is why this particular combination was selected as the basis of my evidence-based training schedule. The version of EBTS that I published is basically this combination that's just rearranged a little bit in order to minimize player fatigue. The third experiment I wanted to show you today is regarding the match tactics training session. After I uploaded the part 7 video, some people have noticed that match tactics sessions are very effective for boosting player growth in FM23. And they've asked me why I didn't include match tactics as one of the ingredients of my EBTS, which is a very fair question. If you remember the training session rankings that I showed you in the part 7 video, match tactics was ranked number 4 in terms of the amount of CA boost, and it was also ranked number 2 when you divided the amount of attribute growth by the number of training sessions per week. So yes, match tactics is a very powerful training session indeed, and I conducted some experiments to investigate the effects of match tactics further. I made some variations of my evidence-based training schedule to incorporate the match tactics session. For example, this combination here is based on the EBTS, but it has 1 less defending session that is replaced with a match tactics session. This combination here has 1 less physical session that is replaced with a match tactics session. And if you take a look at the results for all these combinations, you can see that none of these combinations that utilize match tactics outperformed the EBTS that does not contain a match tactics session. So although match tactics did show promising results in the part 7 video when I tested its effects in isolation, it did not enhance the efficacy of my EBTS when I included match tactics into it. And that is why match tactics was ultimately left out of my evidence-based training schedule. All right, let me now go through some frequently asked questions that were raised after I published my EBTS in the last video. First question, how do you actually load my training schedule in the game? All right, I'll show you. This is what you have to do. So obviously the first step is to download my training schedule file from my Dropbox folder. And once you've downloaded the training schedule file, you need to place it in the schedules folder, which can be found under the Football Manager 23 folder. Once you've done that, you open the game, you go to training, you go into schedules, and right here you can find import schedule. Select the schedule you want to load, you confirm, and you also have to click the save button here so that the schedule is saved. Don't ask me why there are so many steps involved. Football Manager isn't the most streamlined game in the world. The next step is to go to your training calendar. Choose the week where you want to load the training schedule. You go to custom schedules, select the EBTS 23, and congratulations, you've loaded my evidence-based training schedule successfully into your training calendar. Okay, second question. What do you do if you have matches on days other than Wednesdays and Saturdays? All right, so in Football Manager, you can change the game settings so that matches are only held on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And this is how I usually play Football Manager, which is why in my evidence-based training schedule, I've left Wednesdays and Saturdays empty. But if you have matches on other days of the week, you will need to switch the training sessions around to cater for your fixtures. As long as you preserve the number of training sessions that are used per week, it's fine. Just make sure that you distribute the training sessions evenly throughout the week so that you don't fatigue your players anytime. All right, third question. Can you add more training sessions into my evidence-based training schedule when you have less than 2 matches per week? Yes, you can. My EBTS contains 11 training sessions per week, and although I haven't tested the effects of using more than 11 sessions per week, it is plausible that additional training sessions will enhance the performance of my EBTS in boosting player growth. Either defending or match tactics would be good candidates to throw into my EBTS either on Wednesdays or Saturdays if you don't have any fixtures on those days. You don't have to fill out every single free slots in the week though. As I explained to you at the start, the amount of player growth in response to training does become more and more inefficient as you add more training sessions into your weekly schedule. And also don't forget that injury risk goes up as well with additional training. So do exercise caution if you're adding any more training sessions into my evidence-based training schedule. Fourth question, can you use my EBTS for the youth team? The answer is yes, you can, and you don't have to make any changes to the training schedule. As far as I know, there's no reason to suggest that training schedules for the youth should be formulated any differently from a training schedule that's designed for senior players. I guess the only thing is youth players typically have less number of matches during the season compared to senior players, which means youth teams will typically have more free time in their weekly schedules. So I guess you could throw in some additional training sessions into your youth team training schedules if you wanted to do so. But again, do be wary of the injury risk. In FM23, players grow at the fastest rate before they turn 19. So you really want to minimize the injury risk of your players as much as possible before their 19th birthday. All right, fifth and final question for today. What do you do if your players complain about your training schedule? In Football Manager, you get messages in your inbox every once in a while saying that your players are not happy for some reason. Like sometimes they say they're doing too much physical training, sometimes they say they're doing too little technical training, etc. Honestly, I just ignore all those complaints when I play Football Manager. I haven't tested whether training unhappiness actually leads to any detrimental effects like lower rate of growth or worse performance on the pitch. So I can't say for sure, but honestly, I feel the players will always complain about something, regardless of what training schedule you use. So just ignore those complaints like me, and I reckon you'll be fine. Okay, everyone, that's it for today. Any questions or feedbacks, leave them in the comment section and I'll try to reply to them as much as I can. I'll probably do 1 or 2 more videos for this training analysis series before I move on to other aspects of Football Manager. Anyway, thanks guys, and I'll see you all next time.